Fair use and content disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by the host do not necessarily reflect that of the Psychological Association of the Philippines and its management. Furthermore, the views and opinions expressed by the guests do not necessarily reflect that of the host, the show, and the organization. Fair use is the copyright regulation that allows the limited use of copyrighted materials without acquiring permission from the right holders for comment and educational purposes. Views, articles, and images on this episode may contain copyrighted material which has not always been specifically authorized by the copyright owner.
This is being broadcasted to the Teaching Psychology Special Interest Group's social media platforms, when available. If you have any questions for our guests, simply comment on this video and we will try to accommodate all your inquiries. Note that after this broadcast, we may no longer be able to answer your questions. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Live from the Philippines, Dr. Ver Reyes and Professor Monique Muyargas, Chairperson and Co-Chairperson of the Teaching Psychology SIG.
Hello!
Hello!
Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
Yes, a Monday afternoon to a good Monday afternoon to all of you. Happy Pride!
Happy Pride!
Yes, at dahil dyan, meron tayong mga makakasama for today. Ano-ano yung mga flag sa akin. Pero hindi masyadong magandang idea tong ginawa ko. But anyway, thank you everyone. We have a wonderful webisode for this afternoon. Ulitin natin kasi baka minsan may mga nagtatanong sa atin kung nagbibigay daw ba tayo ng certificates.
Walang ganon, Mars.
Carry over pala to nung isang episode. collab natin, no? Dun sa isang channel. So, yon. So, hanggat hindi nabibigyan ng prangkisa, nandito tayo para magbigay ng different venue for other people to learn more about how we can teach psychology subjects or integrate these subjects online.
Yes.
Ayun. Oo, nag-agree yung isang audience natin dyan.
Yan. Kasi it's very close to our hearts, di ba? Yung course na ito, especially dito sa UP, no? Sa UP system because that's the only university, I think, no? As far as we know, na nag-offer na ganitong course and it's part of our curriculum. So we want to share with you this particular webisode so that you might be inspired also to have this in your own tools.
Oo, tama yun. Nadidistract ako dun sa anong nangyayari dyan sa Iloilo. Parang excited sila, no? So siguro, bago natin ipakilala yung ating guest, kung akala mo naman, di natin pakilala yung ating guest, kalagay naman kung sino. Pero, Monique, ipakilala mo naman yung ating guest for this afternoon.
Okay, a very special guest this afternoon. She is the chairperson of the LGBT Psychology Special Interest Group of PAP. Let us all welcome the birthday girl, Miss Beatriz Torre.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Happy birthday to you.
Yun, may paganon kami.
Happy birthday!
Ako ba mga Mars?
At welcome, at least ngayon umi-ere tayo live. Nang hindi tayo naputol-putol ngayon.
Sana magpatuloy ang walang technical difficulties na pag-air natin.
Yes. So, kamusta ka naman? Kamusta ang birthday natin for this quarantine birthday?
Ito, napaka-festive dahil kahit na naka-quarantine ako for my birthday, so iniisip ko noong una na parang medyo malungkot, walang kasama mag-celebrate. Pero dahil may webinar tayo today, parang nagkaroon pa ng isang giant online manyanita. Kaya nga medyo feels natin today.
So, handa ang 18 roses.
Celebrate kayo at saka yung ating mga friends na nasa audience. Audience.
Oo. Andyan si Rem na bumabati sa'yo ng happy birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Nandito din si...
Hi, Rem!
Ayan, kinakabahan na naman ako. Oo. And then from Sinat, no? From Philippine Normal, tama ba? Philippine Normal University. Oo. Tapos meron din from...
Salamat, greeting.
Galing kay Sir Pierce. Ayan, maraming salamat. At meron din from Divine. Ayan. So, happy birthday. We're very happy that you are our guest for this.
Thank you so much. Sobrang happy din ako to share this afternoon.
Oo. Happy Pride na, happy birthday pa. No? So, without further ado, siguro we can start na our show for this afternoon. So, reminders lang dun sa mga viewers natin, if you have questions or comments, please comment down below. We will have we will try to answer as many questions or inquiries as much as you can, as much as we can. And then, particularly in teaching LGBT psychology. Sige. Sige. So, Bea, tanungin ko lang muna, siguro Monique and Bea, no? Ano ba yung mga naging, kasi hindi naman to ito yung parang core, di ba, na ino-offer natin for psychology undergraduate subjects, no? Baka maganda din na malaman ng ating viewers, how did it all start? No, ano ba yung mga pwedeng pagdaanan ng mga
birthing pains.
Oo, yung mga ganyan. Or ano kaya yung mga pwede nilang magawa for, no? Nanloloka ko dito.
Mas may wisdom ata of course, mas may wisdom and historical wisdom si
Grabe yung historical. At hindi hysterical.
institutional memory yan.
Oo,
Ng
ever
course.
since World War II, dyan nagsimula.
Grabe, sobrang historical pala talaga nila. Or her historical.
Historical.
But actually, I think we all know na yung pioneer talaga ng course na to ay none other than si Eric Manalastas, who was also the original chair of the LGBT Psychology SIG. So, mag-hello tayo kay Eric kung sakaling nanonood siya. Hi!
Hi! All the way to the UK.
True.
Yeah.
So, si Eric, ang kwento nito is that he first started teaching LGBT psychology dito sa UP Diliman noong 2010. So, literally, 10 years ago.
Oh my
gosh!
Of LGBT
elementary
school. Siguro yung something that helped for Eric na ma-offer yung course na to is that yung process nito, meron kaming course yung S1E5 and any faculty can propose, parang elective course siya, and any faculty can propose na ito yung sa tingin kong pwedeng i-offer natin as an elective, ito yung magiging syllabus if ever, ito yung expected na outcomes or objectives and so on. And luckily dahil supportive yung department, na-approve naman at syempre we know Eric, I'm sure na napakaganda nung inilatag na proposal for the course. So na-approve yung proposal niya to teach it as an elective. So Psych 195, and then it was very well received by students. So yung actually makikita natin mamaya yung ibang mga activities na i-share ko simula pa nung 2010 that ginagamit na so and na-generate, nakita din niya na very positive yung response ng students. And then eventually, I think noong 2017 or 18, so a few years ago na lang, fast forward din yan, nagkaroon ng proposal na what if gawin na nating parang permanent course offering itong LGBT Psychology dito sa UP Diliman Psych Department. So, ibig sabihin, yung imbis na meron siya yung under Psych 195, na medyo parang any elective. Ngayon, we now ninename siya as Psych 103, and Psych 1 is specific to LGBT Psychology. Open siya to both psych and non-psych majors. So I think ganun din sa inyo, no, Monique, na we got students na both
yes, from other courses or other segments, yes.
Oo.
Pero yung sa amin, 188 yon. Kasi sa social psych series siya. 188 yung course number niya.
May mga may mga problems ba, for example, from administration na parang ano ba yung dapat na paghandaan ng mga tao just in case they would like to forward this? Kasi hindi lahat ng school administrators are very open to these kinds of ideas. So, of course, UP Diliman naman is known to have a very liberal way of looking at specific discipline or to academic disciplines. No? Pero can you share to us, siguro Monique or Bea, ano yung mga parang ano yung medyo yung pang walang ganon Mars, no? Parang bakit natin ipupush pa rin to?
Go ahead, birthday girl.
Sige. Siguro yung isang possible na reaction na ma-receive is yung notion na bakit kailangan pa ng ganyan. Parang I think there's a common notion na parang special treatment. And in fact, I remember yung isang anecdote ni Eric na some years ago, nakaka-receive siya ng feedback from a student na sinabi, at the end of the course ang sabi ay, maganda yung course. Pero bakit naman daw never na-discuss yung straight psychology or yung psychology? Parang ano kasi yung in-enrollan mo na course no? Nasa title naman. So I think it's important. I think it's important to establish na kaya bakit natin ino-offer tong course?
Oo. Matulog ka muna.
Wala pa.
Ayan, okay na. Nagising na. Oo, okay.
Traditionally, yung pag-teach ng psychology, kung aminin natin, may pagka heterocentric.
Yeah.
For example, kung iisipin natin, paano dinidiscuss yung favorite topic ng students, yung love and relationships, Psych 101 or the social psych, madalas merong parang implicit na assumption na we are talking about straight relationships. Walang discussion ng kamusta naman yung LGBT relationships, for example. Or for example, when it comes to dev psych, when people discuss yung pag-feel ng attractions as part of yung process ng pag-develop natin, very often, in fact, in some textbooks, makikita mo siya na during the stage of puberty or adolescence na young people will start to feel attractions to the opposite sex. So parang merong ganoong assumptions madalas na implicit sa teaching and sa the way that psychology is presented. So parang yun yung isang pwedeng ilatag natin. The discourse is important kasi LGBT are
kasi oo. So para siyang ano ulitin natin yung sinabi mo. Baka maganda yung sinabi mo. Ano ulit yung sinabi mo? Na inclusive ba? Tama ba? Na, because feeling ko kasi, since we're talking about human beings, we're talking not just about specific human beings, no? But we're really talking about who we are, no, as a species, I guess, to better understand each other well. Tama ba?
Yes.
Yun ba yung gusto mong sabihin?
To make sure na yung psychology na tinuturo natin, complete talaga siya. Na
inclusive
like
and diverse.
It includes yung diverse experiences, which of course encompasses LGBT experiences.
That's right. Okay, sige. So, I'm sure excited na yung ating mga viewers. We'll just prepare the slides. Pero siguro, can you give us insights on what we're going to talk about this afternoon, Dea?
Okay. So, yung mga isi-share ko today are based on yung experiences ko in teaching LGBT psychology in a more traditional setup, na normally face-to-face in the classroom. Ano ba yung usual na syllabus? Ano yung usual na content? Ano yung some of the activities that we typically do? And then also, mag-share din ako ng mga insights ko. Insights ba talaga? Especially dahil dun sa nangyari nitong nakaraang SEM. So dito kasi sa UP, the second semester starts in January. Tapos dapat hanggang May siya. So I was teaching an LGBT psychology class. And things were starting to get interesting, diba? January, February, ganyan, nagiging komportable na kami at excited mag-discuss. And then suddenly March na putol, diba? Quarantine. And then we had to think about ways to adjust dun sa very limited na options kung paano pa ipapatuloy yung course. So some of the things that I'll share today will also be based on ano yung mga naisip ko na ways para kahit papano ma-complete pa rin or matutunan pa rin ng student yung sa tingin ko, and I'm open to other perspectives, pero yung sa tingin ko na ano yung pinakakailangan ma-discuss for a student to be able to say na ako nakapag-aral, na-complete ko yung course ng LGBT Psychology.
Okay, sige. So, we'll start with your presentation. Take it away.
Let's go. Okay. So, like I said, yung talk natin today, yung pag-uusapan natin today is about how we can teach LGBT psychology online. By the way, for those in the audience na baka sabihin ng mga tao, kami wala namang LGBT psych sa university namin. So, how is this relevant to me? So I invite everyone to consider ways na pwede rin i-integrate yung topics or activities na to in many psychology courses. So if you are teaching social psychology, some of these activities might be relevant sa usapan ng prejudice. If you're teaching developmental psychology, some of these topics and activities may also be relevant. So, ayun, hindi naman kailangan na sa LGBT psychology class lang gawin yung mga activities na to. So,
especially since we wanted to be more inclusive, no? Kasi may mga students talaga tayo who might not be able to relate, for example, the typical developmental psychology course, no? When we're talking about, kunwari, relationships, tapos puro heterosexual lang yung pinag-uusapan. No? So it also allows our students to experience, reflect, no, on who they are as well.
True. So yung just to start things off and to make sure na familiar sa terms na gagamitin, magkakaroon tayo ng quickie LGBT 101. So I'm sure that most of you watching are already familiar with these terms. Para lang, sigurado tayo na pare-pareho tayo ng understanding.
Okay.
At least of our queer alphabet.
Okay, sige.
So, yung ating diversity alphabet, L, G, B, and T. So, si Ernie and Bert as some of the parang mascots of LGBT identities daw. Although they neither confirm nor
deny na sila ay sila ay homosexual partners na I think
pero matagal usap-usapin yan parang very very close si Ernie and Bert. They live together, hindi mo sila makikitang naghihiwalay. So, nagkaroon ng usapin na baka naman sila nito ating LGBT. So, when we discussed at the beginning, pero for this afternoon, magsa-start tayo dun sa last letter natin.
Okay.
So, T in LGBT.
Sige. So, we'll start with a T in LGBT.
Okay. T. So, Ver, ano nga ba ang T in LGBT? Yung T in LGBT. Ano kaya? It's not transgender, right? So, men whose assigned birth differs from their gender identity. So, medyo mahaba yung definition. Unpack natin ng konti. Yung assigned sex at birth, yun yung nung pinanganak yung baby, diba? Sinabi ng doktor, parang it's a girl or it's a boy. So, nag-assign kaagad yung doctor, di ba? Wala naman ever baby na pinanganak na sinabi ng doctor, it's a baby. So, umpisa pa lang, meron ka ng inassign na sex. And then as you grow older, for some people, you might feel comfortable with that assigned sex, but other people do not. And other people develop a gender identity, yung sense nila of who they are in terms of yung gender categories na meron tayo sa society natin. Can be different from their assigned sex at birth. So one example yung meron tayo dito sa slide na to, para sa mga Miss Universe fans, si Miss Angela Ponce a few years ago represented Spain. Siya yung unang openly trans na candidate sa Miss Universe. Tama ba?
That's right.
Other examples, yung next natin na slide. So para naman may local examples din tayo, si Miss Angelina Meade King. Nag-come out siya a few years ago through Instagram. Nag-post siya sa Instagram. So kung nakikita niyo yung center post dyan. Sabi niya, dahil yung apelido niya ay King, sabi niya, sometimes the king is a woman. And then nag-start siyang mag-share on social media ng photos niya na nakapag-transition siya. So yung we refer to Angelina Meade King as a transgender woman or trans woman. So ang ine-emphasize natin is yung gender that she identifies with. So trans men and trans women move or migrate from one side of the gender binary to the other. So kung isipin natin yung gender na space siya, merong mga tao na nung pinanganak, nilagay sila sa isang space, isang end, pero nag-decide sila na they're more comfortable if they move to the other end. So part yun nung transitioning process.
Okay.
Okay.
Pupunta na ba ako sa next slide? Sige. Okay. Parang hindi ka namin naririnig masyado. Okay na tayo?
Sige. Next slide, yes.
Okay, there you go.
Yun. Another local example, si Mr. Ice Segura. So assigned sex was female. And eventually, Ice declared or came out as a trans man. So sabi niya, lalaki yung identity niya. Then, nung na pinag-uusapan natin sa isang LGBT class, aside from gender identity, is yung gender expression. So how does someone express their sense of gender through their behavior, through maybe their clothes, their voice, nila of maybe mannerism. So all of these things, part ng gender expression. So for Ice, masculine yung gender expression niya.
Right. Okay.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Ito talaga yung highlight of this afternoon.
Akala ko birthday mo. Birthday ko pala.
Ito talaga yun. So, yung nakikita natin sa photos na to, no, yung part nung tinatawag natin na transitioning process, a very familiar face. So I thank Ver so much for agreeing to share these photos with us today. Gusto ko lang sabihin, by the way, na we wouldn't share of someone's transition journey or process unless may consent sila.
Ulitin
People,
natin.
they're not comfortable showing yung sige. So, it's very important na yung mga ganitong images documenting someone's transitioning process, lalo na yung kasama yung pre-transition, kailangan may consent nung tao, nung transgender individual whose photos you are showing, di ba? So, very important because we recognize that for some trans men and trans women, hindi sila komportable na dinidiscuss, binibring up, inuungkat pre-transition na pictures or even yung name na ginamit. So we want to respect that. So we ask for consent always. So, yan. So sabi ni Pierce, winner yung photos ni Ver. Winner talaga.
Kailangan i-creative commons.
Sabi yung transitioning process. Mas drastic kasi Pierce eh. So something important to know, yung transitioning, madalas kasi iniisip ng mga tao na biomedical procedure siya, surgery. But actually, transitioning can take place in many ways, including social transitioning. So yung living your self-identified gender and expressing the gender that you identify with your hair, with your clothes, maybe with your voice, maybe asking people to call you by a particular name or asking them to refer to you with yung pronouns that match your gender identity. So yung biomedical transitioning, hindi din siya limited to surgeries. Although posibleng mag-undergo ng gender-affirming surgery ang isang transgender person, they may also undergo hormone therapy. Na yung mga procedures na to, affirming siya dahil nakakatulong siya na mas mag-match yung physical body dun sa parang beliefs natin, notions natin about what a certain gender's body is like. Okay? And finally, in some countries, pwedeng magkaroon ng legal transitioning. So you might ask the state to recognize na sa papers mo, sa passport mo, sa driver's license mo, ito yung, kung ano yung gender identity mo, yun yung nakalagay. Unfortunately, sa Pilipinas, hindi ito option for our transgender friends. So, that's something actually na pwedeng i-discuss sa klase. Ano yung impact nun? Okay. So, almost as nice yung slide na to. Ito rin sa highlights ng presentation natin. So, an example naman from Germany, a trans man named Balian Buschbaum. So, pag sinabing trans man, assigned sex at birth was female, but he came out as a man. Nag-identify siya as a man, nag-transition siya. And Balian Buschbaum is a known transgender activist. Sige, so next slide.
So next slide,
Some more photos. So actually, yun. Ito na yung rest of our presentation.
Thank you so
Joke lang,
much.
puro Balian Bush.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Ito na po yun. Ayan. So ito last na. So pagbigyan niyo ako para ma-celebrate ko yung birthday ko. Ayan. So si Balian Bush, an example of a transgender man. So lilinawin lang natin, hindi po yon yung transitioning slides ko na nire-request years. So isa siyang exemplar of a trans man. By the way, sinishare ko din yung slides na yon in class. Because for many students, many undergraduate students, some of them may not know personally any transgender individuals. So it helps para mas maging komportable sila, mas magkaroon sila ng varied, diverse images in their minds na iba-iba yung mga transgender individuals. So we like to remind our students that we are not born with gender. Yung gender ay social categories na pag pinanganak tayo, nilalagay tayo into one category or another.
Okay.
So next slide.
Ito, favorite mo to, Bea.
So babalik tayo dun sa first letter ng alphabet, yung L in LGBT. So lesbian women, lesbian girls who like, fall in love with, and have intimate partnerships with other girls and women. So lilinawin natin, hindi ibig sabihin ng lesbian na yung babae gustong maging lalaki. Rather, it means yung tinutukoy nito ay yung attractions niya, kanino siya nagkaka-crush, kanino siya nagkaka-relationship. So, babae na nagkakagusto at nakikipagrelasyon sa kapwa babae.
At nakikita niya yung sarili niya bilang babae pa rin. Tama ba?
Correct. So, yung tingin niya sa sarili niya, yung gender identity niya ay babae.
Okay, sige.
So, similarly, yung G in LGBT, so gay men or gay boys, are boys or men who like, fall in love with, and have intimate partnerships with other boys or men. So again, kapag gay man yung isang tao, hindi niya gustong maging babae. Pero isa siyang lalaki, ang tingin niya sa sarili ay lalaki din, at nagkakagusto siya, nagkaka-crush siya, nakikipagrelasyon siya sa kapwa lalaki. So yun yung important po namin.
Oo. At yung ating favorite din na letter, B for Bea.
Ako pala yun no? The B in LGBT for more self-centeredness. So yung B in LGBT, very important din i-discuss kasi madalas nagiging na-invisibilize yung mga bisexual men and women So sila yung mga women and men who are to form romantic relationships with either women or men. So meaning, posible silang magkagusto sa babae or sa lalaki. Hindi kailangang exactly the same yung partnerships, relationships nila na babae at saka lalaki para mag-qualify sila as bisexual. So walang ganon, Mars.
Walang ganon.
Of criteria para masabing bisexual.
Okay.
Basta may isang tao nakaka-experience siya ng attractions to both women and men, we guide that person as bisexual.
Okay, sige. And our favorite.
So, minsan, di ba,
Oo,
dun sa
minsan.
alphabet, wala namang straight. So, paano naman daw kami? Bawa naman. So, ano daw yung terms na pwedeng gamitin for people who are not LGBT. So one term that we use is heterosexual. So if you're a boy who is attracted to girls, you're a girl who is attracted to boys, ito yung term that applies to you. So we want to reassure our viewers that this is also psychologically normal. Yung mga people in our slide are some exemplars of heterosexual individuals.
So,
perfect exemplar. So, minsan naman din natatanong kung hindi ka transgender, ano yung...
Okay, ulitin natin yun, Bea. Kapag hindi ka transgender,
ang tawag sa taong nag-identify na pareho ang kanyang saloobin, kung ang kanyang gender identity sa kanyang biological structure or reproduction, magmamatch, ay tawag doon ay
cis. Cis.
Oo, mga cis. Sige. So, take note. Hindi ito cis as in S-I-S. Sige, tingnan natin yung next.
Yan, cisgender ang tawag dyan.
Kaibigan, cisgender. So, lilinawin natin yung cisgender. Minsan kasi unfamiliar yun sa ibang tao. Sabihin nila, ano ba yun? Insulto ba yun? Epithet ba yun? Ganon. It's just a category. Okay? So just as we use the term transgender to refer to a category of people, yung cisgender refers to people who are assigned male at birth and identify as male, or assigned female at birth and identify as female. Meaning, kung ano yung gender identity nila is similar to what they were assigned at birth. And again, this is normal, psychologically speaking. Yung mga examples natin of cisgender people, baka sabihin ninyo, anong may agenda ba si Bea? Bakit kaya ito yung mga pinipili niyang exemplars? But actually,
ayan na. Sinensor na tayo.
Sinensor na.
Oo.
Kasi yung tao na parang pinag-iisa natin yung sexual orientation. So, for example, si Mocha Uson, who is in the image, came out as bisexual a few years ago. So, we can describe her as being a cisgender bisexual woman. So, meaning, yung pag-describe ng gender identity ng isang tao at yung pag-describe ng sexual orientation ng isang tao ay magkaiba. So, different dimensions sila nung pagtao natin.
So, pwede kang maging cisgender, pero you can also be a bisexual. Diba? You can be a transgender, and you can also be bisexual.
Bisexual, yes.
So, magkaiba yung gender identity, no, at sexual orientation. Kaya tinatawag natin siyang SOGI.
Yan.
Yes. So, sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Yun yung SOGI.
Sexual orientation.
So, a few more
Ayan.
Ayun nga. So, ayan.
Yeah.
So, again, yung being trans and cisgender, ang tinutukoy niya ay yung experience natin of gender, especially our gender identity. So, it's the GI, and maybe the GE, gender expression, of a gendered person living in a gendered society. Sige, next slide. Yun. Yung pagiging LGB and heterosexual or straight naman, ang tinutukoy nyo ay yung partners, attractions, crushes,
Romantic relationships.
and different. Yes.
So, ang tawag dyan ay sexual orientation.
Ay, okay.
So, we have to, kasi kinukonfuse lagi, di ba, Bea, ng mga tao yung sexual orientation sa gender identity. They are different, but they can affect or influence one another, depende sa tao. Tama ho ba?
Tama yon. At
Okay.
minsan din, hindi naman din alam din ng mga tao themselves. For example, yung usapan natin nung Saturday, di ba? Na hindi lahat ng transgender, alam nila na transgender sila. Di ba? Yung parang yung iba, they would still say whether it's a safer term, for example, for some people who are gay, they would prefer or like to identify more of a bi.
Yes.
Because it's more forgiving, perhaps, in a particular society. So, magkakaiba yung LGB and being straight, that talks about, again, sexual orientation, and then being trans and cisgender talks about yung GIE, this one, no, and gender identity and or expression. Tama. Okay.
So,
Doon.
I think I remember,
ma-wrap up natin yung
ang sabi ni
Ayan.
Eric, di ba? Yung gender identity is who you sleep as, and sexual orientation is who you sleep with.
Oo. Kinoment na ni Eric.
So,
Ano ba yung comment ni Eric?
who you go to bed with.
Parang maganda
Gender
to.
identity is who you go to bed.
Yes.
So important yung distinction na to kasi kagaya nung isang example natin earlier, si Angelina Meade King. Trans woman siya. But prior to her transitioning and coming
out.
sa isang bae. So meron siyang prior relationship and marriage to a woman. So when she came out as a trans woman, sabi ng mga tao, so hindi maghihiwalay na sila kasi babae sila. Para ano ba 'yon? May assumption na dahil nag-come out siya as a trans woman, ibig sabihin attracted siya sa lalaki.
Sa lalaki, oo.
So to be correct about the terminology,
So,
paano natin i-identify si Meade? Si Angelina Meade. She's a trans woman.
Si Angelina, she's a trans woman. I'm not sure if she identifies as lesbian. What we do know is that she is married to a woman and she is in love with. So, yung depends on how she identifies. So we might describe her as a lesbian trans woman. And that is also possible and normal. So hindi ibig sabihin na porket transgender ka, automatically attracted ka sa opposite gender.
Yes.
I think yung isa din na magandang point dito, no, na sometimes in these kinds of situations, although si Joey Meade is not necessarily the focus, nagiging question din siguro, 'di ba, ng mga tao.
Yeah.
Paano rin siya? Kasi kung gusto pa rin niya si Angie, then what makes her, 'di ba? So parang siguro what we can say here is that yung pagiging LGBT ng isang tao is also a complex phenomenon, no? And this sometimes discourages people from coming out or from identifying a certain gender identity. Kasi may mga tao din na mai-involve who may not necessarily be all right na pinag-uusapan. Yung ganong glassing, very personal, no, na information.
Right. And we also want to respect that.
That's right.
So, yung isang nangyayari minsan, pag naging na-introduce sa atin yung terms na to, madalas na-excite tayong gamitin. So, gusto natin ma-label lahat ng tao na parang, si ganito, ganun pala siya. So, konting ingat sa paggamit, pag-impose ng labels that a person might not
necessarily agree with.
I think meron pa tayo home point.
There, we have pala Angie, Joey. So, yan. Sige. And then, the other take-home point that Bea was saying.
So, yung concept ng gender identity, orientation, can be used to describe everyone. So, hindi lang to applicable to LGBT people. So, heterosexual people also have a sexual orientation and the gender identity. Cisgender people.
Cisgender people,
hindi yung soji na definition. They can be used to describe everyone.
So, hindi yan exclusive na para lang sa mga LGBT people, but it actually talks about every kind of human being who are also talking, who all have gender identities and sexual orientations. Siguro magandang i-point out din natin, Monique, no, that when you talk about LGBT, they are also talking about gender minorities, no, and sexual minorities. No? At yun yung parang isa sa mga ina-advocate din natin kasi sila yung mas vulnerable, no, to attacks, no, to prejudice, and to a lot of stigma. Sige.
Okay. So, tapos na yung quick natin. So, now we move on to, so medyo malinaw na tayo about our queer alphabet, yung LGBT, yung SOGI. So, ngayon, ano naman yung LGBT psychology? Why do we teach it? Yung LGBT psychology, we can think of it as a field of psychology na pinag-aaralan yung lives, experiences, and well-being of LGBT people. Very importantly, in LGBT psychology, this is done in positive, affirming, and non-stigmatizing ways. So, nire-recognize ng LGBT psychology in the past, may history psychology not so affirming na may pagtingin sa LGBT people, lalo silang nasa-stigmatize. Important na when we talk about LGBT psychology, we learn na merong ganitong approach yung field na to. Na it is concerned with promoting the well-being of LGBT. Yun. Sige.
Okay.
So, a little bit more about LGBT psychology.
Sige. So, ano yung mga features ng LGBT psych?
Okay. So, yung LGBT psychology, kagaya ng kahit anong field ng psychology, is based on research. So, important, di ba? Pag magtuturo tayo ng LGBT topics, ang basihan nito ay mga pag-aaral, mga theories na matagal nang pinag-aaralan at binubuo. Hindi siya based on religion, hindi siya based on fiction, at hindi siya based on our personal beliefs na, sa tingin ko kasi talaga ganito yung mga LGBT. So, kailangan babalikan natin ano ba yung mga published na pag-aaral, ano ba yung established na theories, at ano yung development sa field na to. Pangalawa, LGBT psychology is critical of the view that being LGBT is pathological. Di ba, matagal nang natanggal noong 1975 tanggal sa DSM. Diagnosis ng homosexuality. So, malibon based research that LGBT is not a disorder, it's a disease. So this is important in LGBT psychology.
Sige.
Pangatlo,
Ay, wait lang, Bia. Ulitin lang ni Monique kasi medyo
Right.
naputol-putol. Baka mamaya ma-misquote ka. Na.
Ayun. The purpose of instituting or teaching LGBT psychology is to make sure that people understand and be reminded na ang being LGBT is not considered pathological or abnormal or as a dysfunction or a disorder, no? Matagal na itong natanggal sa DSM during the 1970s pa. So based even on that, no, we have to update the way we frame even ang ating pananaw, no, a perception, ang ating beliefs, ang ating attitudes on the different diversities ng mga tao.
Okay. Sige, Bea. So the third feature that we always like that should be part of an LGBT psychology is
to seek equal rights and social justice for LGBT individuals, families, and communities.
nire-recognize
So ito
na
usually, di ba, Bea, Eric would always say this is more of a course, na more than just a course, it's an advocacy.
right. So, ito yung course na may pinaglalaban. At ang pinaglalaban nito ay equal rights. Equal rights LGBT individuals, family, communities. Kasi nire-recognize natin na ngayon, yung lipunan natin, hindi pa equal. Marginalized yung mga LGBT individuals and their families at nakaka-affect yun sa well-being nila. Kaya may ganitong advocacy yung LGBT.
Okay, sige. So may hindi lang to theoretical, no? Monique, no? Hindi lang siya theoretical, pero meron tong pinaghuhugutan.
Pinaghuhugutan.
Oo. Kasi ang end goal natin is to ensure equal rights and serve justice, particularly to, again, sexual minorities and gender minorities. And the fourth would be
challenges the privileging of heterosexuality. This is important kasi in the field of psychology, diba, if hindi nyo pa na-notice, prior to the LGBT psychology, hindi pa siya nagiging, masyado siyang heterocentric. Ang examples, ang mga researches even, no, ang mga theories are always framed in the context of heterosexuality. So, underrepresented or being considered invisible, yung itong tinatawag nating LGBT community or LGBT individuals. Right, Bea?
Right. So, yan yung tinatawag, yung term na ginagamit natin for that, yung heteronormativity, na piniprivilege at tinitreat as normal and ideal yung pagiging heterosexual.
Yes.
Isa yun sa important topics in an LGBT psychology class. So mamaya babanggitin natin na
nakatulog yata si Bea. Oo, mamaya babanggitin natin. So sige, move forward tayo.
Okay.
Of course, Monique, di ba? As psychologist and as educators, as teachers,
we can do something about two very important parang pillars or purpose of why we are advocating or pushing this forward. Yung anti-LGBT stigma and discrimination that's very, very prevalent, no, over decades and decades within and outside the practice of psychology and education. So this is yun nga minention kanina ni Ver, no, when we were talking to Bea about it, na ano ba yung mga hurdles na if you plan to put LGBT psychology into the curriculum to teach it, eto yon, dito nanggagaling yung hugot, no? We have to anticipate that there will be certain difficulties because not many people, parang it's a hard pill to swallow, no? This is something new and this is something that's considered na hindi siya nakasanayan ng mga tao na pag-aralan, no? That's why we have the LGBT Psychology Special Interest Group pushing forward and advocating for this course to be spread all over the Philippines in various universities and colleges. Diba, Ber?
Mapapansin mo dito, nakalagay as psychologist and psychology educators.
Yes.
Hindi siya confined na nagtuturo lang ng LGBT psychology.
Yes.
Yan. As psychologist, it is incumbent sa atin, no, sa profesyon natin, sa disiplina natin, na may gawin tungkol sa stigma na hinaharap ng mga LGBT at ng discrimination against them.
Yes. And it's even advised, no, or it's even encouraged now when you teach other courses in psychology, you make this also as a salient point, no? Even when you're teaching, for example, let's say psych-stat, the examples you provide need not be heteronormative, no? Because most of our examples given or cases or examples are framed in that. So eto, nagbibigay siya ng bagong way of looking at things na ino-open tayo sa reality that's been there na hindi natin ina-acknowledge for a long time.
Bea, are you back? Picture pa rin si Bea. Bea?
Okay. So, why LGBT psychology, Ver? Why? Bakit ba?
According to Dr. Patterson, una, kasi essential to for those of us who identify as LGBT to care about our own lives. So, for example, ako bilang trans woman, mahalaga to sa akin kasi kailangan maintindihan ko sino ba ako at pinapahalagahan ko kasi yung aking buhay at yung aking well-being, no? Accordingly, sabi din ni Dr. Patterson, kasi daw if we fail to do this, how could we achieve any kind of integrity or call ourselves a psychologist?
True.
So,
Yeah.
baka sabihin naman kasi kayo trans, kayo or lesbian. But as cisgender and straight and cisgender psychology teachers, mahalaga din maintindihan mo ano ba yung mga pribilehyo, no, bilang isang straight, for example, na guro. No, para maintindihan mo din ano yung mga pangangailangan ng iyong mga, for example, clients, no? Dahil iba-iba yung ating mga kwento at iba-iba yung pinagdadaanan natin. Ano daw yung second, Bea?
Ay may kinalaman na dun sa sinabi mo just now na any psychology that fails to include LGBT people will not be complete. Kung ang goal ng psychology ay ma-understand, ma-describe, ma-explain, ma-predict ang human behavior, human cognition, magiging kulang yon kung yung isang buong group ng human beings ay hindi napapag-aralan at hindi na-discuss, diba? So, kaya may LGBT psychology para maging complete yung field ng psychology and the way that we teach it. So, kung isipin natin, yung pag-aral ng LGBT lives and experiences is really enriching psychology as a field also.
Yes. All right. Sige. So here at PAP, especially yung LGBT Psychology Special Interest Group, ano ba yung mission na ninyo? ninyo
Bea.
So, ang ating mission as the LGBT Psychology Special Interest Group is to build an LGBT inclusive psychology in the Philippines. So, dine-develop natin yung capacity ng Filipino psychologists sa iba-ibang aspeto, including research, practice, and yung dinidiscuss natin today, yung education or teaching. So, yung mga sinishare natin today are part of that goal para matulungan yung mga fellow psychologists, fellow psychology educators natin malaman kung iti-teach ang LGBT psychology.
Kung paano iti-teach ang LGBT psychology. So let's go with no? How do we teach ba LGBT psychology, let's say during the pandemic or during online? Okay. So, sige.
So, siguro pakita natin yung traditional SEM. Ano ba yung itsura ng isang LGBT psychology syllabus? So, shinare ko dito yung typically, in traditional meaning face-to-face in the classroom. Yung course objectives natin include defining sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression as psychological constructs, demonstrating a grasp of current and research in LGBT psych, developing an appreciation for the diversity and richness of LGBT lives and experiences, thinking critically about claims made regarding both LGBT and heterosexual and cisgender people in psychology at yung implications nun, and exploring possible ways, lessons learned from LGBT psychology towards change, maybe personal or social change. So ito yung goals ng LGBT psychology na course, at least the way I frame it. At sa tingin pa rin namang i-pursue yung goals na to kahit na sa online class natin siya pag-aaralan. Pero posible lang na magbago yung paraan kung paano natin siya in-approach. So if we look at the next slide, nakalagay dito yung overview ng topics na kina-cover sa isang typical semester of LGBT psychology in the traditional face-to-face classroom setting. So we start with an orientation, setting the tone. So we introduce LGBT psychology. We discuss key perspectives and debates. We discuss issues in doing LGBT psych research. Yung isang very important na topic din discuss natin yung diversity and intersectionality, as well as stigma, dahil isa siyang napakalaking reality in LGBT lives. We also discuss coming out, which is one of the experiences that is unique to LGBT people. We discuss LGBT health and well-being, paano to na-affect ng stigma at minority stress. And then yung isa sa favorite topics ng students, LGBT love and relationships, paano nagpo-form, paano na ma-maintain, ano yung challenges, and then LGBT parenting and families, and when there's time, yung phenomenon ng allies, straight allies, and allyship.
At ang maganda dito, Bea, no, that these are all based on scientific research. No? Hindi to anecdotes, hindi to kwento-kwento lang.
Correct.
For example, like yung coming out, no, wala ka namang nakitang straight, cisgender na sabi niya, uy, paano ba ako magsasabi sa nanay ko na straight ako, no? Diba? Parang people don't necessarily see that as, magka-come out lang, ang dali-dali lang naman. Pero for a person who doesn't really think about coming out ever, diba? Parang important din siya na tignan, no? Na magandang topic din.
Maganda yung point ni Ver na whenever we teach these topics, we make sure na based siya on empirical research. And we also do our best to use research na local, meaning based on Filipino samples. So for example, dun sa topic ng coming out, i-shout out natin yung isa sa audience members natin, si Lucena. So isa sa readings na ginagamit na this course is Pierce's study on the coming out experiences of young waray gay men. Important siya kasi in my experience, and I don't know if it's the same for you, Monique, ito yung readings, yung textbook readings, very Western.
Yes.
But yung coming out models na dinidiscuss, very Western. At may particular pattern siyang dinidescribe na pagbasahin natin yung local research, lumalabas na parang hindi necessarily the same.
Yes, that's very true, no? So it's important that you get a balance of the references from the West or from, sa labas versus that of yung locally generated researches. And marami sa atin that we did this researches for the past years, and it's appreciated by students. Nakikita nila yung difference, no?
Correct.
Nakikita nila yung contrast of realities and context. So, kudos to our local researchers na nag-advocate to look into a different lens, no, of understanding LGBT psychology.
Okay. Sige. So, ay na traditional SEM, ano ba yung mga activities and highlights na madalas ninyong na-encounter, Thea?
Okay, so examples of yung mga fun or memorable na activities or highlights that we incorporate in an LGBT psychology. Meron kaming activity na tinatawag na Heterosexuality Diary. Mamaya mas i-share ko yung details ito, but basically ang ibig sabihin nun, we give students the task to keep a journal or diary for a few days, mga 7 days, ng mga instances ng heterosexuality na napapansin nila sa paligid habang nagko-commute sila or habang nanonood sila nag-binge sila ng Netflix, ganyan. And then they write a reflection paper about it. And we process it also in class. So helpful siya na activity para makita, mas maging visible sa mga estudyante yung na-mention natin kanina, yung heteronormativity. Na yung ginagalawan pala nating mundo, parang heterosexuality is really just everywhere. At hindi siya kine-question. Or hindi kine-question yung right nito to exist. Another example of in a traditional SEM, at least dito sa Diliman, we might yung isang field trip namin na nasa loob lang din naman ng campus.
Ang cute.
Parang nakakatawa yung mga estudyante pag in-announce yan, parang, class, may field trip tayo. Pupunta tayo sa Youth Center for Women's and Gender Studies. Ay, okay. Pwede mo palang lakarin yung field trip mo. But we do this because the UP Center for Women's and Gender Studies has a library which has a dedicated collection of LGBT-themed books, resources, mga thesis, mga dissertation. So kapag diniscuss yung doing LGBT psych research, diba, one of the things that we discuss is na minsan nahihirapan yung students humanap ng references. So we point them in this direction na actually merong ganitong dedicated collection just here within the university. Yung one. We do a lot of experiential learning activities. For example, yung tinatawag na privilege walk, which we often use para mas ma-engage yung students sa topic ng intersectionality. So mamaya medyo mas i-discuss. Ang nilagay ko dito 10 things about yourself, pero actually ni-revise ko na yan, ginawa ko siyang 3 things about yourself. So may kinalaman to sa coming out at i-discuss din natin yan mamaya. So role-playing. So for example, one of the things we discuss in this class is how can you respond when someone comes out to you as LGBT, ano ba yung affirmative kang mag-react, mag-respond? Kasi many students, hindi nila pala sure paano ipakita nila na affirming sila. Practice it in class, nagro-role play, para kapag magkaroon ng ganung situation, mag-come out yung friend nila, yung sister nila, whoever in their life, ready sila. Alam na nila kung paano mag-respond. What else? We might watch LGBT-themed videos or listen to LGBT-themed songs. Pinapakinggan namin yung Born This Way, yung ating favorite LGBT psychologist, si Lady Gaga.
Or pwede rin si Hailey Kiyoko, di ba? Masyadong open ang kanyang music videos.
For more current references. Pwede i-analyze yung content nito. Ano yung messages na underlying. Dahil nagkakaroon ng, every year sineselebrate yung UP Pride March. So may Pride March within the campus. Ginagawa rin namin siyang opportunity for students to practice their LGBT research skills by interviewing Pride March participants. And then yung isa sa pinaka-favorite namin na way to make this class come alive is to invite guest speakers, posibleng experts sa isang topic, or posibleng people whose lived experiences allow them to share yung insights nila tungkol sa isang topic. So for example, yung nakikita natin sa photos dito, when yung sa babang photo, yung kapag dinidiscuss namin yung transgender experiences, including transitioning, I find it important to invite guests who are actually transgender. Para sila mismo yung makapagkwento nung sa karanasan nila. Ano yung naging karanasan nila ng transitioning, coming out, relationships, and so on. Yung isang favorite natin na saying, di ba Monique, yung nothing about us without us.
Without us, yes.
So, wag natin pag-usapan yung mga tao na hindi sila mismo kasali dun sa usapan.
True, yes. At saka na-appreciate ng mga students kasi they experience it na yung tao mismo mag-narrate, mag-express ng kanilang experiences sa mga estudyante, and they ask a lot of questions, no? It piques their interest.
Super.
Kasi hindi naman lang tayo yung vacuum of knowledge when it comes. Hindi naman ako expert sa transgender identity, for example. Hindi naman ako expert sa love and relationships. So it's nice, especially one of the things we also do is to invite LGBT couples, no, in class. So they talk about it and they're so kilig, no. So that's really fun.
Sige.
So, yeah. So, nakikita natin dito sa activities na to, parang they rely on a lot of, di ba, face-to-face interaction. Parang yung assumption talaga is na merong opportunities for people to mingle and talk amongst themselves. So, paano yun ngayon pag online? So, ano yung dito sa next slide natin, titingnan natin, ano yung ibang challenges in teaching LGBT psychology online? So yung iba, very basic and generic challenges naman. So we all know that students and even teachers, oh no, that's me. Students and teachers have varied accessibility of devices, internet, maybe even electricity. So kailangan natin pag-isipan ng maigi kung gusto ko bang mag-hold ng synchronous sessions na kailangan online kaming lahat at the same time. Paano kung hindi maka-access si student? Sabihin mo ba sa student mo na kailangan umakyat ka ng bundok para maka-attend ka ng class? Parang may mali, di ba? So we have to consider that. And related to that, yung obstacles posed by technical difficulties, failures, alam natin to mga
Lalo ka ba? Alam na.
Just ko, lived experiences ito. Pero totoo, di ba? For example, what if yung activity mo for the day was may guest speakers ka, excited ka, excited rin yung students. Tapos biglang yung guest speakers mo, nahirap yung connection, ayan na nga.
Correct. Ang ginagawa namin imunik dyan, sumasalo kami. Parang kailangan, the show must go on.
Must go on, di ba?
At sobrang ramdam na ramdam ko talaga. At na-appreciate ko yung pagsalo. So yes, so good point, di ba, na as a teacher, if using strategies like having guest speakers, we have to be ready with backup options, backup plans. Okay. Yung isa pang challenge na gusto kong banggitin, yung distant and minimized human interaction and relationships. Kasi ito yung kind of class na, and actually most of our psych classes naman, di ba? Not just LGBT psych. Ang laki nung learning na nagaganap through the discussion of students among themselves, yung sharing nila ng ideas, perspectives. So, challenging kasi nawawala yun or nami-minimize yun. Di naman nawawala completely kapag online. Even yung interaction with the students, nami-minimize. So, it makes it a little more difficult to build rapport. Nagkakaroon din ng loss of opportunity for hands-on interaction with materials. So, kung merong mga tangible materials na gusto mong ipakita sa class mo, ipa-experience sa class mo, parang hindi mo magagawa yon. And finally, I want to be very clear. Have to consider yung ethics of recording, uploading, or sharing of discussion include self-disclosure. So, kunyari, kung ang platform mo for teaching LGBT psychology is gumagamit kayo ng Facebook, may Facebook group kayo. Tapos, in discussion, maybe a student comes out or shares their personal experiences. And maybe they feel comfortable kasi parang private group naman, tayo-tayo naman nakikita. But we know that technology allows users to screenshot, to record. So yung things that yung privacy or confidentiality that some students may take for granted sa face-to-face classes, yon mahirap i-ensure kapag online. So isa siya sa challenges. But hindi naman puro challenge kinakaharap natin when we teach LGBT psychology online. There are also some exciting possibilities. So for one, yung pagkakaroon ng online discussions like forums, comment sections, Twitter threads, kung ano pa man yung mapili mo, dahil pwede siyang asynchronous, di ba? Hindi kailangan ngayon na mag-reply or ngayon na agad mag-comment. So it gives students time to think about their responses. Di ba? Alam natin na meron tayong students na medyo ayaw nila yung napuput on the spot sila for a discussion. And they actually are able to respond better given yung konting time para mag-process, mag-isip, mag-reflect. So sometimes students benefit from that, especially when it's about sensitive or complex topics. Yung online learning can also, to some extent, provide a greater level of privacy for students to engage, be considered outside their usual comfort zone. So for example, just the fact na dahil online, parang people maybe can choose na hindi, di ba, yung instead of having my camera on, pwedeng wala. Pwedeng avatar na yung nakikita. Ganon. For some students, they might feel more comfortable kasi hindi sila masyadong nag-iisip ng anong sasabihin ng mga tao about me kasi merong feeling of greater anonymity or privacy. And also, nag-a-apply din yun sa professor. Uy, tayo. So, aminin natin, a class like this, sometimes students may form assumptions or biases about us. Na, kaya niya sinasabi yan eh. Si ma'am ganito yan eh. So, yan eh. So, kaya ganyan yung topics niya. And yung visibility natin in an online setting, that can also be a good thing kasi hindi gaanong nakaka-form ng preconceived notions yung students about us. And that may make them a little more open to some of the things that we discuss. Yun.
Sige.
So having said, sige, go.
Go ahead. So
having said that, ano nga ba yung mga natin for teaching LGBT psychology online? So una, kagaya ng nabanggit ko kanina, we may have to be realistic and decide kung ano lang yung key topics doon sa syllabus mo na sa tingin mo important talaga for students to understand by the end of the course. So, ito, naging difficult to para sa akin this past SEM kasi nga we had a syllabus that was already suddenly na-cut short yung SEM. Napaisip ako kung ano ba talaga dito sa syllabus na to yung para sa akin parang non-negotiable na kailangan matutunan ng students to. So for me, yung list ng topics na to na nilagay ko dito, these are some of the things that I think are important for students to be familiar with para masabi natin na naka-complete siya ng LGBT Psych course. So that includes yung SOGI framework, di ba? Parang ako, I would be so uncomfortable kung natapos yung SEM, tapos hindi pa rin malinaw sa students ko kung ano yung difference ng sexual orientation at gender identity.
True.
Sabihin ko, ay, may mali ata. I think it would also be important to discuss LGBT mental health and well-being, particularly yung depathologization of LGBT identities and experiences. Kasi napaka-common siyang misconception, di ba? We discuss androcentrism, activity, para lang magkaroon yung students ng context na para magkaroon sila ng lens na, oo nga, no, sa mainstream society, in psychology, madalas yung focus is on the experiences of heterosexuals or men, kaya androcentrism. Start to challenge that. It's also important to discuss ethics in LGBT research, I think. Kasi kahit na hindi naman natin ina-assume that our students will go on to become LGBT researchers, yung madidiscuss katulad ng avoiding heterosexist language and research design can be used and can inform psychology students even when they're not doing LGBT research. So important siya to learn. Intersectionality, I believe, is an important topic. Parang hindi ko ma-imagine na tatapusin mo yung sem na hindi ka nag-discuss ng intersectionality. Stigma and minority stress.
And siguro,
coming out.
Clear. Sorry. Clear lang natin, ano ba yung intersectionality? Kasi baka hindi rin masyadong clear sa...
So, yung intersectionality, ang pino-point out niya ay lahat tayo, meron tayong iba-ibang social identities or memberships in social group. Example, woman ka, heterosexual ka, at the same time Filipino ka, at the same time middle class ka or upper class or lower class. So yung combination ng iba-ibang identities na yon
intersecting.
Makes a difference. Nag-i-intersect yung iba-ibang identities or categories na kinabibilangan natin. At yung intersections na yon, yung nag-create nung unique na karanasan natin ng both and also stigma. So, kung mahalaga to para malinaw sa students na hindi pare-pareho yung ang lahat ng LGBT.
Yes.
Diba? Yung experiences ng isang LGBT na Muslim are probably very different from LGBT Catholic. The experiences...
PWD, yan.
So it's important na maging malinaw yan sa students na just because we are talking about people who belong to the group na tinatawag nating LGBT, meron pa rin silang pagkakaiba-iba. So ibig sabihin, posibleng merong LGBT na medyo mas privileged, posibleng may LGBT people who are more marginalized. And so that's also important to recognize. Yun.
Okay. So stigma and minority stress, and the last would be coming out. No? I think maganda din yun. Sige, ano ba yung mga suggestions mo for teaching these topics, no, online?
Okay. So paano natin ituturo yung topics na to? Yung isa kong suggestion, once you've identified na, ito pala yung para sa akin, ito yung important topics na must cover, must see. Una, make use of existing materials and activities that can be adapted for use in online learning. So kung meron ka ng existing activities, there's no need to reinvent the wheel na kailangan ibang activity kasi online. So we can consider ano ba yung elements or components na yung activity na to in person. Pwede rin bang ma-replicate yon online na mag-modify ka lang ng konti. So kung pwede, gamitin na natin, 'di ba? Kung hindi, saka tayo mag-iisip ng paano yung ibang strategies na pwedeng gamitin. So I'm going to share a few examples of activities that we use na sa tingin ko pretty easily adapted to online learning. So yung isang example natin, yung na-mention ko kanina, yung heterosexuality diary. By the way, gusto ko lang i-credit na this instructions na nakasulat doon sa slide natin were actually put together by Eric Manalastas. So kanina pa natin binabanggit si Eric, no? Si Eric actually submitted this activity design at nanalo to ng award from the Society of Psychological Study of Social Issues. So nanalo to as a teaching resource. So yung activity na to, yung aim is to increase students' awareness of heteronormative. Gaya nung na-describe ko kanina, they will keep a daily journal of observations, experiences, and encounters related to heterosexuality. So, medyo simple lang kasi yung instructions. So, if you look at the next slide, pwedeng bigyan yung students ng clarification ng ano ba yung pwedeng kasama doon. May nakasalubong ka na straight couple na nag-holding hands, ayun, you can put that in your heterosexuality diary. Or may narinig kang kanta ni Taylor Swift na tungkol sa ex niya na lalaki. So pwede mong i-include yun sa heterosexuality diary mo. So usually we give them a minimum number of words, and we actually don't ask them to submit the diary itself, but a reflection paper. Kung ano yung mga realizations, thoughts nila about the experience, about doing the activity. So, sa experience namin, napaka-effective nito, parang strong ng impact nito sa students. Both yung students who are LGBT and non-LGBT, madami silang nare-realize na, sobrang taken for granted yung pag-show ng affection ng heterosexual couples in public. Nobody bats an eyelash. Parang, so nare-realize nila na sa sobrang common, nakakapagod i-diary lahat. Yung isa rin, memorable din for me, I've had a student who identified as LGBT herself, na kwento niya na nung ginawa niya yung activity na to, medyo nalungkot siya kasi nakita niya na to babae, meron siyang partner na babae din. Kinikwento niya na one of the entries in her diary was about how nag-birthday yung sister niya, who is straight. Sinurprise daw si sister nung boyfriend. So, bonggang surprise, ganon. Tapos, kilig na kilig lahat ng tao, kilig na kilig yung family. Tapos, si student, sabi niya, happy ako for my sister, pero nalungkot ako kasi I want to do those things for my partner. But I don't think I can. I don't think people will react in the same way. So powerful yung realizations from this simple activity. And I think magiging relevant pa rin siya. Mo siya as an online. In an online class setting, doable pa din siya. Siguro lang yung limitations are that students will, hindi sila masyadong lalabas sa bahay nila. So, baka you might want to emphasize na they can be observant of TV shows that they watch, songs that they listen to. So, hindi kailangang live people, yung observations nila of live people, but also of cultural artifacts, pwedeng kasama. So, yun yung isang example na strategy na pwede natin gamitin to teach about heteronormativity in an online class.
Right. Sige. I think you have an example of that particular diary ba? Tama ba to? O iba pa to?
Ay, iba to.
Oo.
Sorry. Okay. Ito naman, activity to na yung 3 things about me. Example to ng activity that I would use in a face-to-face class to discuss coming out. So yung ginagawa namin sa activity na to, nagpo-form sila ng pairs, individually nagli-list sila ng, kaya 3 things, diba? 3 things tungkol sa sarili nila. Tapos pag na-list na nila yon, nire-reveal ko na actually yung gagawin ninyo ay mag-getting to know kayo ng partner mo dun sa activity. Pero ang goal mo ay hindi niya malaman yung 3 important things about you na nalista mo. Paano kayo mag-get to know each other na hindi meron kang tinatago na information about yourself. And so, pinaprocess namin after. So, kung titingnan natin doon sa next slide, yung processing questions, we talk about how does it feel when you are trying to become friends with someone or get to know someone, pero may mga bagay na ayaw mo or nahihirapan ka or share. At nagiging springboard siya para mapag-usapan yung experience ng coming out, yung challenges ng coming out, and how we can be more accepting or affirming when our friends or family members come out. So pinili ko din to as an example kasi sa tingin ko, doable din siya online. So pwede namang ibigay yung instructions na to at sabihin mo sa students na mag-pair up sila, mag-chat, for example. Kung kaya nilang mag-video call, pwede rin, or audio call. So same instructions, yung difference lang ay hindi face-to-face. So pwede siyang i-convert na wala magbabago about the activity. Yun. So those were some examples ng suggestions kung merong existing activities na hindi masyadong kailangan i-modify. But what about activities na parang mahirap gawin or hindi ganoon kadaling i-translate to an online setting? Ang example ko dyan, na-mention ko kanina, yung privilege walk. So, ano nga ba yung privilege walk? So, sa privilege walk, you start by assigning students a specific identity. So, each student, bibigyan mo siya ng, okay, for this activity, eto yung identity mo. So, si student 1, isa siyang trans woman, working at a call center. Si student 2, isa siyang straight and cisgender male doctor, so on. So, i-internalize mo yung role na yon. Tapos, you have them line up. And then, bibigyan mo sila ng situation na pag-iisipan nila kung sa identity nag-a-apply ba yung situation or not. So, if it does, they step forward. If it doesn't, they stay behind. So, for example, yung isang naka-flash dito, if you can show affection for your romantic partner in public without fear of ridicule or violence, so pwede kayong mag-holding hands, mag-akbayan na walang magre-react, you can take one step forward. So you can probably imagine na sa isang face-to-face classroom setting, napaka-powerful niya na activity, di ba? Demonstrate na yung privilege, it can really affect where people are able to go in life. Diba? So at the end of, after mga 20 or 25 na situations, so titingnan ng nagugulat yung mga students, di ba? Kalat-kalat na sila. May mga students na nakakabot na sa dulo ng room. May students na talagang starting point. And then we process na ano yung implications nito. So this is one activity that we use to teach the concept of intersectionality. So online, posible ba siyang gawin? Meron akong nakita, so on the next slide, makikita natin, merong teacher na gumawa ng online quiz na para siyang simulation ng privilege walk. So, yung pre-provide ko dito, nandyan yung link. So, nasa isang site siya called quizzes.com. So, pwede mong i-search quizzes.com privilege walk. Parang basically same thing. It will ask a set of questions and you just answer yes or no. Tapos sa dulo, makikita ninyo kung nag-rank or nag-place relative to each other. Hindi siya not exactly as powerful compared to the in-person, yung physical version na gagawin mo siya. Pero, at least, nagkakaroon pa rin sila ng idea na, oo nga, yung iba-ibang situations pala, pwedeng doon yung different forms ng privilege and prejudice na na-experience ng iba't ibang identities.
At
so this is something you can...
Sorry, at intersectionality din, ano? Kasi dito mo makikita yung areas, different aspects ng isang pagkatao and how far or how short a person's distance can be, no?
And most students do not have a full grasp of this kasi yun lang yun inoccupy niyang set of identities. Pero when it comes to LGBT realities, social identities, dun makikita nila at mafe-feel nila, ma-appreciate nila yung struggles, yung challenges, yung difficulties of navigating the world, which most cisgender heterosexuals take for granted.
So literally putting yourself in other
In
people's
other person's shoes.
Exactly.
Yes, oo. Literal talaga.
And another person's stiletto heels. Charot.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. Sige.
Or Crocs.
Ano nga to? Ayun, so ano to share? Isa rin to sa favorites natin, yung I Heart Lesbian and Gay Rights pin. So yung sa activity na to, we used it to discuss the topic of stigma. Yung ginagawa namin, kami ng simpleng pin, yung type na you can pin it to your shirt or your bag. And then yung pin says simply, I heart lesbian and gay rights. Yung instructions for the students, sinusuot nila yung pin na yon in public for a few days, 5 to 7 days. They record their observations kung paano nagre-react yung ibang tao. And then, dinidiscuss namin kung ano yung mga naging realizations nila about stigma after for a few days.
After a
So,
few
doable ba siya kung online class? So, sa next slide, ito, nilagay ko yung sa tingin kong pwedeng modifications. Dahil nga, dahil sa quarantine, hindi naman, parang meaningless naman yung magsuot ng pin kasi nasa bahay lang sila. But one way that we could work around that is to instruct students to maybe use the same image as their profile pic in one of their social media accounts and see kung ano yung naging reactions ng mga tao. So, nag-change ka ng Facebook profile pic mo, I heart lesbian and gay rights. What would people react at all? Would they say something? Would they ask you anything? So, pwedeng ganun din. I-explore nila yung experiences nila of stigma related to that.
Okay. What about your guest speaker sessions? Paano naman
Ayan.
yun? Paano naman yun, Bea?
Okay, I think na-mention kanina ni Bea that guest speaker sessions can be online, no? Again, you might want to do a video conference or what do you call this? Yung parang pre-recorded para hindi mahirapan yung mga estudyante, like, yung bandwidth and so on. Yung mga ganon, no, na issues at technology issues. So you can pre-record an interview, or probably you can ask them, no, who they know can be part of the class, or have a small group na papag-uusapan with that guest speaker. And they can ask questions, whether it's a discussion board or a discussion platform online ito. Again, warning there, no? There will be, you have to consider yung ethical guidelines and conditions when you do this, because there are some guests who might not want to be, what do you call this, known or be online. So there are things that you can do for anonymity and confidentiality measures, no? So pwede itong, possible pa rin ito. It's just a little tweaking, no? It may not necessarily be lahat kayo sa course or lahat kayo sa class may sit there or may be part of the discussion, and then there's a guest, no? You can pre-record it, or they can throw in questions during the discussions or during the airing of the pre-recorded interview with the guest speaker. Yeah.
I think ito din yung isa sa mga suggestions din ni Bea, no? While we're waiting for her to come back. Pag meron talagang mga technical difficulties ang lola mo. Sige. So, I think you also use this ba? Anong tawag dito? Monique? Hindi ko na tuloy. Hindi ko talaga. Sorry.
Yeah.
Ayun na ulit si Bea.
Very relevant, di ba? Di ba, Bea? Relevant ito.
Gusto ko yung ang smooth lang ng ni Monique. Parang walang nangyari. Sorry. I don't know what happened. Okay. Anyway, yung nangyari, so this particular semester, dahil nga parang biglang nag-transition bigla to online yung classes from in-person. And I wanted to make it clear to students na yung topics na dinidiscuss sa LGBT Psych, relevant pa rin siya under the current situation na may pandemic, may quarantine, nag-i-exist pa rin yung stigma, nag-i-exist pa rin yung prejudice. So I shared with my students several articles or videos or websites na pwedeng magpakita sa kanila nito. So yung article na to na naka-screenshot, galing sa site na motherjones.com. Hindi siya specifically LGBT site, by the way, despite the name. But it's a very interesting article kasi kwento siya ng isang gay man na COVID survivor. Tapos sabi niya, gusto ko I tried to donate yung plasma ko kasi dapat, di ba, pwedeng gamitin yun for treatment, potentially.
To help, yeah.
But when he tried to donate, he was not allowed to. And the reason was because sexually active siya with a same-sex partner. At pwedeng makita ng students doon na, oo nga, no, even in the current situation, yung stigma against LGBT people and their relationships, their sex lives, merong impact not just on LGBT people themselves, but even on the broader community. Diba? Another example, so yung article na to about the vulnerabilities of transgender people during lockdown. Because transgender people, especially if they are currently undergoing the transitioning process, posibleng yung lockdown, yung quarantine may make yung access to health services a lot more difficult, especially for trans people. Yun. So, pwede rin i-discuss doon na yung merong specific needs in terms of health, yung LGBT population, that may not be visible to us kung hindi natin naiintindihan ito. Yun. Yet another example, ito naman sa South Korea. So, yung instance na to, merong mga articles that showed how nung nagkaroon ng parang second wave ng infections doon, na-trace siya to the activities of some individuals in bars and clubs that were in a part of the city na parang kumbaga parang known na gay area or LGBT area nila. And then yung nangyari was parang nagkaroon ng in-out yung mga tao, yung mga patients who had been diagnosed with COVID. Kasi parang ina-associate yung pagiging LGBT nila dun sa kontra ng COVID. So nakikita natin na kahit na hindi naman related at all to SOGI yung disease na ito, vulnerable pa rin ang LGBT people na magkaroon ng stigma at magkaroon ng notions na related yung COVID sa sexual orientation nila.
And opportunities for more discrimination, no?
Right.
Against LGBTs. Sige.
Yung isa kong shinare naman na, because I wanted to show na hindi naman puro nega. Important to sa atin, di ba? Parang lagi na lang kawawa, lagi na lang ang nega. We also want to show students na there are joys and positive experiences in LGBT lives. Yung isang nahanap ko was this Instagram account na meron siyang ginagawang series, tawag niya Quarantine. So, nag-take siya ng photos of LGBT people or families who are quarantining in their homes. Tapos, ini-interview niya sila while following social distancing protocol. Na tinatanong niya, what is one thing that has been a source of joy for you during this quarantine? Tapos, sobrang interesting for my students yung sagot ng ibang mga in-interview. Kagaya ng sinasabi nila na, I've been able to play with my gender a lot more ngayon na naka-quarantine. Kasi, hindi ka masyadong nag-worry about what people will say. So pwedeng meron din tayong pwedeng i-discuss na parang mas uplifting din na LGBT experiences. Para na message natin ay hindi, oh no, kawawa ka naman kung LGBT ka. Yun. Ito yung aking last suggestion. I think all of us, kahit hindi LGBT psychology yung tinutunan natin, kailangan nating matutunan na mag-let go. So don't be afraid to let go of activities, of requirements, or topics that really will not work online. And maybe those that are not really essential to your course objectives. So yung example ko, favorite din namin to yung making games. When we discuss LGBT activity na sobrang fun niya talaga kasi in class, yung they pair up, they find a partner or a mate in class. Pero kahit anong isipin kung paano ba ito i-adjust sa online, parang hindi talaga mag-work. So, sometimes you just get, di ba, you come to terms na, okay, as much as I love this activity, as much as I think my students would have loved it, maybe it will just not work online.
Yes.
Yun. So, letting go.
Sige, and yung last take natin.
Okay. So, ito, just some things about making the online classroom a safe space for LGBT students, LGBTQ students. Ano ba yung safe space? An environment that is welcoming and supportive and safe for LGBT students. So, if they feel na pwede akong mag-participate sa class na to, hindi ako ibubully, hindi ako isa-screenshot ng mga kaklase ko at i-out sa buong mundo, they will feel safer, they will do better. And everyone will benefit. All of our students will benefit if online classroom is a safe space. So ano ba yung mga things na pwede natin gawin para mas maging safe space yung ating classroom? So una, I think from the start, it's important to discuss ground rules and expectations. And we might want to provide students with ways to contribute to and agree upon these rules. So pwedeng yung students mismo mag-generate ng suggestions na ito yung mga bagay that will make them more comfortable or will make them feel respected. So important na may clear policies tayo against stigmatizing speech and behavior. Lalo na kasi ang daming, parang most of the discussions will be done online. Eh di ba alam natin na minsan medyo mas madali na maging, magsabi ng masasamang mga words online compared to kapag face-to-face. Kasi kapag hindi mo nakikita yung kausap mo, madaling magsabi ng kung ano-ano. So we want to make it very clear to our students na this is not acceptable. We welcome debate and discussion, but it has to be done in a respectful way. We can also remind students na dahil kung written communication yung ginagamit, like email or chat, posibleng ma-take out of context yung sinasabi nila. So we want to remind students to think before click or think before they send. Okay. Related doon, so yung next slide natin, kapag merong nag-violate policies, like for example, somebody in your class uses a slur during in a post or a forum discussion, kailangan mag-respond tayo doon. We address it immediately. We tell them that it's unacceptable. We also can make the most out of such instances by using it as a teachable moment. So in this na sasabihin mo lang na, basta wag mong sabihin yon kasi bad. Instead, explore ninyo kung bakit ayaw natin ginagamit yung ganoong terms or slurs. How do they make LGBT people feel? Kung yung incident ay targeted towards another student. So merong sinabihan na student na ginamitan siya ng isang slur. It's also important to offer to support. Maybe in a personal, direct communication. You chat with them, you email them, is there anything they need? Okay. Sige. So next, I think this is very important in any class actually, hindi lang sa LGBT class. Yung pag-recognize and pag-respect ng names and pronouns kung saan komportable yung students natin. And that might not be the name that is on their official, di ba, yung nakalista sa attendance sheet mo na pangalan nila, posibleng hindi yun yung name that matches their gender identity. So I think it's important for us as teachers to show that we respect our students' gender identity by asking them at the start of the SEM, ano yung pronouns mo? She, her, hers ba, they or them, he, him, and pwedeng maging part yun ng ground rules ng class. Na when we talk to other people in this class, we use the pronouns that they have said na ito yung pronouns ko. So it shows respect and it makes it an inclusive space. I do also want to say na bilang mga tao lamang tayo, minsan nagkakamali tayo, di ba? Lalo na kung hindi ka talaga sanay, or parang meron kang preconceived notion, itong tao na to, he, him siya. Pero sinabi niya, she, her po ako. Minsan nagkakamali tayo. So it will happen. But we try our best. If we do make a mistake, if you use the wrong pronoun, apologize lang. And then correct it. So hindi naman siya end of the world. Ito na yung last thing that I want to say. Again, nababalikan natin yung ang laking consideration talaga in online spaces ng privacy and confidentiality. I think it's also important so that we can encourage our students to participate. So kapag well-managed yung confidentiality. And it will also help us avoid potential violations ng kunyari, data privacy. Diba? So some things that we can do, we can make a commitment. So right at the start of the SEM, sasabihin natin, lahat ng isasubmit nyo na assignments dito are confidential. Ako lang ang makakakita. But you can acknowledge the limitations. Like for example, kung yung nature ng assignment ay magpo-post sila, create sila ng video, and they will post it online. And then, magkakaroon ng limitations dun sa confidentiality. Others, dahil online yung setting, we need to provide very specific guidelines about sharing personal information. So kung yung classmate mo, may sinabi doon sa online class setting, it has to be clear to our students na hindi, kunyari, comment may post classmate. Hindi natin basta-basta pwedeng ipuntain ng mga tao na hindi naman part ng class.
Yes.
So, we still treat the class as diba, a confidential space. Yung next item na I mentioned, require that they be alone during video or audio discussions. Alam kong for some of our students, medyo mahirap i-ensure. Yeah. Pero the reason we want to do this is na, kasi yun nga, we want our students to feel safe na kapag may sinabi ako during a video discussion, hindi ko iisipin, ay narinig ba yun ng tatay ng kaklase ko? Ngayon, kung hindi ito ma-hear ng lahat ng students, then maybe we just avoid, di ba? Parang we will find another way na lang to have that discussion. So, wag na lang video or audio. Kung sa tingin ninyo, hindi naman ma-assure tong part na to. And then, communicate the expectation that no one will copy-paste or otherwise distribute another student's contribution. Baka pwedeng pag-usapan dito yung exemptions like, kunyari, may consent naman si students. Kasi, I know there are times na students say something very insightful and their classmates might want to share it with the outside world. Parang, ang ganda nung sinabi ng classmate ko na to, tingnan nyo. So, pwedeng i-negotiate nyo with your class na okay ba yun sa lahat as long as may consent. Yun. So, this part can be negotiated, I think.
Yeah.
Yun.
Ayan. Yay!
After all of those things that we've said and shared, I really hope na merong na napulot yung ating audience today. I'm so grateful to everyone who has been watching. Thank you. And yung lahat ng shinare ko is really not just from me. So alam natin na galing to sa mga karanasan, mga insights ng mga iba-ibang members ng PAP LGBT Psychology Special Interest Group.
Yay!
Kaya,
Yay. So just in case they would like to get in touch, we have the email of PAP LGBT SIG as well as the Facebook and Twitter pages. I think later on you'll be you'll be launching your YouTube channel. I think tama ba?
True. Yes, that's the goal.
Nagulat ako, akala ko hindi pwede.
Yay!
So yun, maraming salamat, Bea. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The birthday girl, imagine she spent her birthday with everyone, our viewers.
Oo, akalain mo na itawid natin lahat ng mga
I know. Gusto talaga namang, sabi nga, medyo experiential, no? So habang pinag-uusapan natin yung technical difficulties, talagang, ayan siya. So, pero I also want to thank you, Ver and Monique. Na-demonstrate niya rin yung pinag-uusapan natin na pagsalo. Sobrang salamat. Yon. And thank you again to everyone who has been watching.
Right. Thank you, Bea. Just before we go, kasi baka mga later on may mga questions pa. But we have something from Josephine Bautista. Ay, bakit ako nag-feedback? Sabi niya, never felt the experience of others standing up against active transphobia in my experience. Not using preferred pronouns to seeing this makes me feel hope. So yun. Sorry for the comment, but I think we appreciate it.
I think yung transgender natin. Ang lungkot kasi so
Oo. Parang may problema pa rin talaga si Bea.
Pamilya ako kanina.
Ayan, okay. Better.
Hindi ako naka-silence. Okay. Ayun, I just want to say to Josephine, thank you for sharing yung sense of hope na to na I really hope that more and more LGBT students will feel this, and I hope that yung talk natin today makes it clear na as teachers, marami tayong maliliit na bagay na pwedeng gawin na sobrang meaningful for our LGBT students, especially our transgender students. So it will make a world of difference. Diba? So let's take the few minutes of time para magawa yung mga bagay.
I think very clear naman. Ikaw yung hindi masyadong clear ka pa.
Sorry, madam.
So,
ito talaga ambiguous ang mga bagay.
Correct. So thank you, Junix also. Sabi niya, love these tips. Sometimes as teachers, we tend to forget, making it as a learning experience. No? So, sige. So, siguro ako tatanungin ko na lang, Bea, if ever ba that, ano yung, kunwari, di ba kasi first time nilang i-integrate nila to, what if magkamali sila? Kunwari, di ba, hindi naman lahat alam na alam kung ano yung LGBT psych. No? Yes. So, what tips for you and Monique kaya yung pwede nyong masabi na what if magkamali ako? Kasi sometimes yun yung nagiging ano natin di ba? Parang that holds us back from helping other people or from trying it out. What can you say to them?
Well,
ako ba muna? Go, Monique.
Okay. Before, when I clearly remember the first time I taught this course, I always would seek the wisdom of Eric about this kasi bago ka and you don't feel that you're ready or skilled enough, or kasi you have a big set of shoes to fill, no? It would help to, before you take on a topic, you read thoroughly about it. If you have questions or weak areas na feeling mo hindi ka masyado knowledgeable, make sure that you read on it, get legitimate resources and ask the right people. And of course, hindi nagkulang yung LGBT SIG to help us out when we're trying to make this work, no, as a course. Yeah.
Oo. I think may gustong i-share si Bea before we go there. Tama ba, Bea? I think gusto mo
Oo, hindi ko na to na-include sa slides ko, but I wanted to share na merong yung APA, American Psychological Association, merong book na pinublish na Teaching LGBTQ Psychology, Queering Innovative Pedagogy and Practice. And although yung full book is not available online, pero lahat nung activities that are presented in that book are available online. So itong link na to na naka-flash, pwede nyo ma-access. Maraming iba-ibang activities and any teacher of psychology can use these kung sa tingin ninyo makakatulong sa class ninyo.
Yes, ayun.
I also want to add, if you want to take on this course, especially if you're a first timer, kailangan mo rin to clarify your own attitudes and bias, because it will cloud a lot of things if you don't do this. So importante that you clarify your own prejudices, your biases, and attitude mo towards certain issues, particularly LGBT issues. So para ma-dissect mo what is the lesson versus what is an opinion coming from you. Yeah.
Gusto ko lang din idagdag, no, related dun sa question ni Ver kanina. I think it's important for us to be very, very honest with ourselves about our limitations, di ba? Na ito yung mga topics na hindi ko talaga masyadong alam. So baka dapat mag-bring in ako ng guest kapag ito yung pag-uusapan. Or ito yung isang topic na medyo hindi ako komportable. Ano kaya yung magagawa ko to make myself more comfortable? And sometimes we can communicate that to our students as well. I think meron akong former students na nandito. So alam nila to na
Marnil ba to? Si Marnil ba yun? Yung nagsabi na
sino ba? Sino yung nandito kanina? Si Yoshiko Hirakawa. Hi, Yoshi.
Okay.
Yung isang bagay na ginagawa ko in my classes, na dati pinag-iisipan ko kung mahalaga bang malaman ng students yung soji ko. Hindi ba pwedeng it doesn't matter. But I think ang reflection ko was, I want students to be aware na I'm a cisgender heterosexual woman, pero nagtuturo ako ng LGBT Psych class. Kaya ko yun dinidisclose to students para malinaw sa kanila na yung mga ituturo natin, hindi to manggagaling sa personal experiences ko. Limitation ko na hindi ako makapagkwento galing sa personal experience. And so I want that, gusto kong nakalatag yun sa start para walang parang misconceptions na pag sinabi to ni Ma'am Bea kasi naranasan niya yon, na hindi. But I assure them na this is based on research, this is based on yung mga reliable na sources. Kapag importanteng mapag-usapan yung lived experiences, meron tayong guests who will be filling in those gaps. So I think it's important for us to be honest.
Oo. At saka
limitation.
Important din naman yung internet natin. Pag may guest tayo. Yung pinaka-take away ko talaga dito sa mga webisodes natin minsan na ganito. Alright. The LGBT Psychology Special Interest Group talks also, I would like to also share the book on teaching LGBTQ psychology, Queering Innovative Pedagogy and Practice. So you can siguro screenshot na lang kung ano yung kasi baka matabunan na naman yung mga mukha namin kapag lumaki. So screenshot away and yon. So again, thank you so much, Bea. But before we let you go, meron lang may mga ipa-plug muna si Monique, no, coming from The
Ako, okay.
Teaching Psychology Special Interest Group. So on Wednesday,
Okay, on Wednesday, we have how to teach Tuloy Filipino. That's a very timely kasi nahihirapan ng mga, usually ito yung nahihirapan yung mga teachers. Yung speaker natin ay si Professor Jay Yakat of UP Diliman. I think he was here watching us. Hi, Sir Jay. That's on Wednesday, the same time, 2 to 4 p.m. This is in partnership with Pambansang Samahan Sikuluhayang Pilipino. And then on Friday, we have how to virtually teach field methods with none other than Dr. Mira Alexis Afreneo. That's the same time, 2 p.m. That's in partnership with Research in Psychology, SIG.
mm-mm. At yung susunod pa, for the last week of June, we have naman Monique? Okay. We have naman how to virtually teach developmental psychology. Kasama naman natin si Professor Joan Trina Moreno Javier, who's the chairperson of the Developmental Psychology Division, as well as Dr. Danny Ochoa from UP Diliman as well. Yan. This will be on June 26, Friday, June 26, 2020, Friday, also again at 2 p.m. Again, no, we just have to inform everyone, you don't need to register for our webisodes. You can catch the replays of these episodes on our YouTube channel and flash down sa different
Ayan.
social media platforms of the divisions and the SIGs to watch also our live broadcast as well. Ayan. Thank you so much. Happy birthday, Miss Bea. Maraming salamat.
Happy birthday!
Hello.
Oo, maraming
Thank you.
Sige, maraming salamat everyone. Good afternoon and have a great week ahead.
Stay
Bye.
safe!
Thank you.